we just got the new bell housing, so I'm gonna open it up and check it out. Whew. So we had to have this custom made to fit the BMW S54, and then this back plate here goes to our Samsonis transmission. So it's all built in one piece instead of having adapter plates and all that. New QuickTime bell housing on one scale, and our stock BMW bell housing with the Samsonis adapter plate on the other scale. Another thing is this plate on the back. It's like an 1/8 inch thick plate, where on the stock BMW bell housing it's like a real thin, maybe 18 gauge sheet metal. And the difference in weight, 22 pounds heavier. So that's why we've been trying to save weight on other stuff in the front of the car, just trying to get the car back to where it was with the stock bell housing in it. And I think when we get it on the scales, when the car is all done, hopefully we will have achieved that. So I got the release bearing pedestal mount finished up, made this flange, machined it out, made these two pieces pressed together with a little step on it, welded those up, took the Clutch Masters release bearing mount that they make, machined the back side of it, welded that up, got everything squared up, made sure it was all good in the lathe, and now that will just pop in and give us the right height. We've got the engine pretty much all wrapped up, the wire harness on. There's the oil scavenge pump for the turbo, since we don't have a dash 10 or dash 12 drain back to it. We use that pump to suck the oil out of the bottom of the turbo. We've got the Dock Race exhaust manifold on there and the EFR exhaust housing. We've got 6 individual cylinder temperature probes, so we can tune every cylinder individually and make sure that nothing is running lean or overly rich. These are the water cooling lines that go into the turbo. We leave them loose until after we put it in the car, so we can clock them in the right position and get them tucked away, zip tied up so they don't rub against anything. This steel braiding lining is really good. It's strong, but it's also very abrasive. So if you have your wire harness sitting here and chafing on that, you're going to rub a hole in your wiring harness and have issues. So we got to make sure all that's out of the way and not going to cause any damage. Alright, so we're going to set up this Clutch Masters. This is the 850 twin disc, so I want to show you guys how to set up the release bearing height. With the hydraulic release bearings, with the internal slave cylinders, you got to make sure you get the spacing between the bearing and the fingers on the pressure plate correct. You want about 3 to 5 millimeters. 3 millimeters being something that you're going to check the clutch pretty often for wear. As the clutch wears, these fingers move up, and if you don't have a lot of clearance there, basically you're going to come in contact with the bearing and it's going to be pushing the clutch in all the time. So you want to have enough room there, but at the same time, if you have too much space, the release bearing doesn't have a lot of travel, and you can have the release bearing actually pop out and all your fluid comes out and you got to pull the transmission apart. It's a big nightmare. So to measure the spacing, you want to measure the clutch distance. So we'll measure these fingers here, and that is right around 9 millimeters where the bearing is going to ride. And then we need to measure with the plate where this sits. So that's right around 99 millimeters there. So we'll take this number and subtract it from this number. So basically we're 90 millimeters of where this sits compared to this plate. So now we'll go over to the bearing. And behind the bearing, there's spacers, these little rings. There's a couple different sizes. Some of them are about 1 millimeter, 1.5 millimeters, some are 0.5 millimeter. So you just stack these spacers to get the distance you need. So first thing, make sure that the bearing is pushed all the way down. If you got a bleeder valve, open it up, put a rag on there, smash the bearing down, step on it, make sure it's all the way compressed so you know your starting height. Then you measure off the bell housing. Measure down. And right here we're at 93 millimeters, and our spacing over there on the engine was 90 millimeters. So 93 here, 90 on the engine. We've got 3 millimeters of spacing, so we should be good there. We check our clutches every 2 events, so that'll give us enough wear room to basically run that clutch for 2 events without having to look at it. We just got the parts from FCP Euro. Alright, so we got a high pressure hose for the power steering, bearings. These are the bearings that go in the top of the trailing arms up here, the wheel bearings that go right in there. New power steering reservoir. We change these all the time. Every season they have a filter inside, so I think they're like 20 or 30 bucks. So always keep our fluid clean. Another spare bracket for that reservoir also. These are the front wheel bearings. Getting the rear trailing arms ready to drop the bearings in. We're going to heat these up a little bit. Then I got the bearings in the freezer, so they shrink. The heat makes these expand a little bit, so they should just drop in place real easy. Got our parts sitting in here, so I'm going to grab these bearings out one at a time. Nice and frosty. Boom. Now we're going to put in the snap rings. Make sure those are locked in place, and don't forget to put those in before you put the hubs back in. So we're getting ready to put the engine in the car, and last round we noticed that these transmission mount, they're like welded in nuts basically. This one we had to replace before. This one was stripped out, so we went ahead and drilled it out, and now we've got these weld-in nuts that are going to go in place. Weld those on there, and we'll have some good threads to be able to bolt the transmission back down. car's all back together. We've got the engine in, transmission, drive shaft, everything's in there. Brand new engine, ready to start this thing up. Got it filled up with liquid moly oil, and let's see, cranked it over, got oil pressure, so it's ready to fire up. Running good, nice and smooth, fired right up. Now if only we could go drive the cars. I don't know when that's gonna happen, but at least it's running.